Hello, John. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your channel. Yeah, it's a bit of a somber subject, I suppose. Nevertheless, an important one and one that needs to be covered. And I'm absolutely delighted that you've tackled this job. You know, I have in my office a short roll of honour. There's only 20 names on it. But those are the men from the 5th Battalion Rhodesia Regiment who lost their lives during the Bush War. And sometimes I will stand in front of this list and I will gaze at the names, and I have to confess that I become a bit sentimental. My mind goes back to those times, and certainly my mind goes back to the names on that list of people that I knew. It seems such a long time ago, and yet in some respects it's not. And so I'm conscious of the fact that there are surviving loved ones who may actually be watching this channel. And so I have to choose my words very carefully and circumspectly, because the last thing I want to do is to raise some issue that they were perhaps unaware of, and which is disturbing in nature to them. So I don't want to do that kind of thing. And at the same time, I have to be factual in what I say. There are 20 names on this list. I do not profess to know all of them. I know a number of them. But I won't speak of all the ones that I know. If you will allow me to, perhaps two will suffice. And maybe we can say that they are representatives of the others. Yeah. You know, 5RR was an all-white unit, like the RLI was. And we went down one call-up, with, you know, as a white unit. Came back the next call-up to find that we were now integrated with a good number of black troops from the Rhodesian African Rifles. And there they were amongst us. I don't know what their exact status was, because they were referred to as members of the Rhodesia Regiment, and yet the cap badge was RAR, and the beret was RAR, and even the ranks that they had were RAR. And more to the point, when any of them died, they were listed in the roll of the Rhodesia Regiment. So amongst these men, these many Africans, was a fellow by the name of Oliver Rangirai. And he kind of created a good impression, you know. When I first saw him, I was struck by the fact that he seemed so even-tempered and calm and relaxed and happy above all else. Always a smile on his face. I never once saw him in a mood. He was popular, he was hardworking, and he was everything good that you would like to say about a person. And I have a few sort of images that come to mind when I think of Oliver. We stopped on one occasion on the side of a gravel road for a smoke break, sentries around, and Oliver had seen something in the bush. Not anything like that, but he grabbed a shotgun and disappeared in amongst the trees and the grass, and presently we heard a bang, and eventually he emerged, shotgun in one hand and triumphantly holding a dead guinea fowl in the other that he had shot for the pot, and a big smile on his face. He was so happy. In fact, it was one of those happy kind of days, and folks were, you know, sort of congratulating him from the trucks and that, and there was a really nice vibe all around. That's the one thing I remember when I stand there in my office and I look at that list. The other image I have of him is myself standing in the line, the queue, if you like, at the cook tent, and there's Oliver standing behind the table with a huge ladle in his hand. Goodness knows what he's doing there. He's not a chef or a cook, but there he is, bearing a helping hand, and that's the sort of guy he was. So I get to the front of the queue with my mess tin, and he's busy handing out big dollops of sudza. Now, sudza, for those of you who don't know, is a very stiff porridge made from maize meal, and it's a great favorite amongst blacks and whites alike in Rhodesia. So I feel this heavy lump of sudza going into my mess tin, and I look up at him, and he's got a big grin on his face, and he says, "Well, would you like some more, sir?" There's no good calling me a sir. I'm not an officer. But that's the sort of guy he was. Humble and ever respectful. I said, "No, Oliver, that'll do nicely, thanks. Just give me a bit of nyama and a bit of gravy and I'll be fine, thank you." That is the other memory I have of him. But then there's one final image, and it's not as pleasant as those two. We were at a place called Lakonde Mountain. Now, this is a huge finger of rock that points up into the sky. You can see it from miles around in the Sipalilo area. And we had moved onto the flanks of this rock, not particularly very high, because I think that thing is insurmountable. But we had settled down with a pair of binoculars, and we're going to watch the countryside now. But it's late in the day. And while we're there, suddenly a contact breaks out, and it's in the distance, but not so far away that we can't hear the sounds of the detonations and the gunfire quite clearly. And man, what a ferocious firefight! Usually it's just a few bangs and the rattle of either a MAG or RPD, and it's over in seconds. Not this. Went on and on and on, and heavy explosions, which rather puzzled us. But later on, we discovered they were from rifle grenades. And then there was silence after a while, and a chopper came to pick us up and take us there, and we were carried aloft onto a high ridge, and there was quite a dramatic scene before us. A number of dead bodies lying around in the grass and amongst the broken rock up there. And what had happened was that a stick had been sent on follow-up, and they had ascended this ridge a little bit further off to one side, and as they were climbing up, unfortunately one of the security force members had an accidental discharge. And the sound of this weapon being fired reached the ears of the terrorists. And of course, they immediately put two and two together and knew that somebody was on their trail. So they set up a very good ambush, I have to say, and waited. And so the stick proceeded along the top of the ridge, unaware that they were walking right into a trap. And which they did, of course. And Oliver, who was in that stick, was hit almost right from the beginning. So, yeah, there I was with this final image of him lying in the grass, dead. And, that was quite a harrowing sight for me. I bent down and took his rifle and just felt along it to make sure that the weapon hadn't been damaged at all in the firefight. He'd taken, several hits. So it was late in the afternoon. There was no ways that we could move off that feature, and I was told to commence a follow-up the next morning. So we all settled down for the night, the survivors of the contact, and we lay there in our sleeping bags in the dark. And it was an eerie night, silent, nobody coughing or snoring or any. You couldn't hear a sound, And I lay there looking up into the sky, just the stars twinkling there. And then the tracker that had led the stick into that ambush whispered to me, "Mart, I can't take this any longer. I've had it. I'm not doing any more follow-ups." And I understood what he was saying. He was a good man. He was a good tracker, and but he'd come to the end of his tether, and I didn't blame him for once, because, as I said, that was quite a punch up. No wounded on both sides, but a lot of corpses, eh? And so we spent the night there. I think each with his own thoughts, and an eerie night, as I have mentioned. And your mind plays games with you. You know, you imagine all sorts of things as you lie there. I mean, I won't say that these dead people were in arm's reach of one, but they were all around, you know, in the grass where they had been, where they had fallen. So the next morning, the chopper came, took the survivors of that contact away, took the bodies away, and the last I saw of Oliver was him being gently laid in the back of the helicopter. Yeah, that was the memory of Oliver. It was an expensive call out for the battalion. We lost a number of men that over the course of 2 months, and you can see it on our roll of honor. A few days later, we lost another man. Now, this soldier, for a very brief period, was an MAG gunner for me. And, he was a good man, eh? Robbie Robertson. And he had the strangest way of moving through the bush. I can never forget it. And I say that as him walking through the bush as an MAG gunner. That's quite a substantial weapon. And with all its ammo, it's a load to carry. But Robbie would watch me out of the corner of his eye, and I'd be watching him, and he would see where I would be taking the stick. And so as we would be moving through the bush, he would be looking, scanning the ground ahead of him. Yes, eyes open for any sign of ambush, definitely. But he's also looking for high ground. And wherever he sees a bit of high ground, and if it's a little bit ahead of us, he'll sprint to it, and kind of pause there, watching his dressing, not getting too far ahead of us, and then looking for some more high ground. And if it happened to be, say, on our right flank, he would sort of sprint behind us and make his way there, wait again. And so, I would watch this in fascination, because the end result of it all was that he would be covering more than twice the distance that we were covering. And I don't know how he did it. MAG gunners usually are quite tough guys, eh? They have to be. And I can't tell you that Robbie was a particularly brawny, big guy. I remember him as average build. But man, did he have stamina, hey, and endurance. And what a hard-working guy. And I spoke to him. I said, Robbie, you're going to run yourself to death doing this. And he said, "Oh, Martin, hang on." He said, "If anything happens, if there's a contact, I've got to be where you want me, and that's got to be on high ground." He said, "Don't worry about it. It's part of the job. I don't mind it at all." That's the sort of man that he was. And it's one of the things that impressed me about him. But we would also, have times, Robbie and I, when we would talk in base camp. Maybe, we'd settle down there. There are sentries out. You feel safe enough, and the guys can relax and have a few beers and the smoke, and they talk. And Robbie talked. And, man, he was excited about the future. And it rather fascinated me to listen to him. I older than he was, married with a family. So, to see this excitement and anticipation and hear it in Robbie's voice when he spoke, was something that I found quite appealing. And he was working on the railways. He had a job as a station foreman, and he was quite enthusiastic about his job. He had written an exam for promotion to station master, and he was awaiting the results of that. So he was pretty excited about the prospect of change in position, and I would listen to all of this. But he had a girlfriend, and she was the love of his life. And Robbie spoke often about her and the plans that they had. And if I remember correctly, they were going to get engaged as soon as that call-up was over. And he was, he couldn't wait. And it was just a matter of days to go, really. And then we'd be home, and the excitement of getting married and starting a family and starting a new home and where they would live and so on. And he would share all these thoughts. And I would listen to all of this. And, it was lovely. Robbie then left my stick. He was also an NCO, went presumably back to his stick, and I was given another MAG gunner. And I also lost a rifleman, I should say a private, by the name of Changwara. He also went. Now, the company sergeant-major had decided that we did not have enough truck drivers, and there would be a driver's course down at Brady Barracks in Bulawayo. And so he looked for volunteers amongst our African soldiers. Were there any that were prepared to go and do a driver's course and become a truck driver? And Changwara in our platoon raised his hand, and so he was taken away from me, and off he went to Bulawayo. And he returned in time, and the CSM appointed him as a driver. So one night, something had happened, and they needed to send a couple of sticks out. So Robbie climbed in the front of the 4-5, and Changwara was his driver. Now, normally we would all sit in the back of the truck. You'd just have the driver in the front, and you wouldn't have somebody else sitting there in the passenger seat, under normal conditions. But I would sometimes do that, particularly if we were new to an area, and I would take a map with me, and I would do this during daytime, naturally. And as we drove along, I would be watching the countryside and the odometer on the vehicle's instrument panel, and I'd be making notes on my map. 7 kilometers from the base camp. This is what, there's a village there, and there's a culvert nearby, and so on. And I'd have notes. So that if it happened that I was called out at night for any reason, I could just call out the distances to the driver, and he would just watch his odometer. I'd say to him, when you get to 17 kilometers from the base camp along this drag, you ought to find a village on your right-hand side. Slow down there when you get to that mileage, and we'll debus. So it was a useful technique. Now, I don't know if Robbie was doing that night, but he was certainly in the front of the 4-5, and they set off. Now, when you get outside of Sipalilo on the way to Mahui, not far out of town, there's a very steep downhill, and it leads to a narrow bridge over a river. And as they descended this slope, the vehicle started picking up speed. And what I heard was it started veering a bit from left to right. It was showing signs of going out of control. And when it hit the bridge, it did. Those who were able to jumped off. And of course, there were a few injuries amongst that, but nothing life-threatening. Changwara jumped out as well, and the truck left the bridge, turned upside down and landed in the riverbed. And unfortunately, Robbie, I think, had tried to get out through the circular hatch, which is above the passenger seat in the 4-5, and he hadn't enough time to have made it. So he was crushed underneath the truck, and he lost his life there. And I heard about it, I think, the next day, sometime during the course of the day. And I was very shocked. I mean, I thought of all the wonderful plans and the future that he had, and everything that he was hoping for, and it was gone like that, gone. And I thought immediately of that girl that he loved, and I'm sure she must have loved him as deeply as he did her. And I thought, how is she going to cope? Has she heard the news yet today? And my heart just went out to her and to the other members of Rob's family. I just said a little prayer. Lord, just help this girl. Just make her strong, and give her the ability to get through this. And so the years have gone by, and I see Robbie's name on that list, and I have very nice memories of him, and I think of the girl as well. Well, it was a long time ago, in that sense. She's no longer a girl. She's a lady of some years now, if God has spared her. And I wonder still sometimes, how is she, and how did she get through all of that? And I still say a little prayer for her. So, I see on social media very often, there'll be a post, and it'll say, on this day, we lost the following people during the Bush War, and there would be a list, usually the man's name and the unit that he came from, sometimes a little bit of information, died in a terrorist contact, or was murdered by CTs at his kraal, or whatever the circumstances were. And then folk would post comments, usually a little rest in peace, salute, we will not forget you, which is nice, and one appreciates all of that. But when you look at a list like that, or even as I look at the roll of honor that I have displayed in my office, it doesn't tell the whole story. Behind those names, there is a mass of people who have been burdened with grief and sorrow and anguish and disappointment on an emotional level. And there are no words in this world that can describe or quantify that kind of deep sense of loss. And it's not just on an emotional level, even on a practical level. Loss of earnings, loss of a breadwinner in the family, loss of a father who would give direction and guidance to his children, loss of a companion. It just goes on and on and on. The names on these lists are the tip of the iceberg. The story is momentous that lies behind it. And we sometimes miss this, I think. I see other things on social media. I see some Rhodesians, not many, because we tend to be quite patriotic, even after all of these years. But here and there you will come across somebody saying, with respect to the Bush War, what was it all about? What a waste of life. It should never have happened. And I feel quite sorry when I read things like that. Because you see, all of us, all the people on that 5 roll of honor, and myself, and all those who served with me, we reported for duty at Cranbourne Barracks every 6 weeks or whatever it was. You know, 6 weeks in, 6 weeks out. So it was like every 12 weeks, I suppose you'd say. And every one of us knew that there was a possibility that we would not come back alive. But we went. It wasn't because we were all conscripts and that we faced a prison sentence if we didn't go. That is true, but that was a small, insignificant part of the story. We went because we understood if we don't fight the goose in the bush, we're going to fight them on our front doorsteps. And that just wouldn't do. So all of us, I think, cherished the way of life that we had in Rhodesia. We loved those that were near and dear to us. We had hopes for the future that were worth preserving, and we went and we fought. And these were high ideals. And the outcome at that moment, at that point, was not important, whether one lost the war or won the war. The fact is, there was the call of duty, and one answered it. And to say, with respect to the war, what was the point of it all? It's a waste of life. I think that really depreciates the sacrifice that these brave men made. And I wish that folk would desist from that kind of thing. Let's rather be grateful for the sacrifice and that they made, and for the way that they kept us alive and safe. As long as Rhodesia existed, we were as safe as we could hope to be in our beds at night, because people were out there in the bush fighting on our behalf, and some of them sadly died doing that. So to the men on this list, I would say today, you have fought the good fight, you have won the race that was set out before you, and now may you eternally rest from your labours and be sure that your deeds will be remembered and not be forgotten. And thank you very much for all that you did for us. And thank you, John. Thank you.